What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the Sixers Digest YouTube channel. My name is Barnard, as always, and the time is here. The Sixers roster is set, and basketball has arrived. The NBA season has now kicked off, and the Sixers season is on the horizon starting Thursday. I'm here to break down the final roster decision, which involves a former Sixth Man of the Year being released from the Sixers, and everything else involving the team at this current state, as well as dive into the James Harden situation, which is the cloud that hangs over this Sixers organization. Now, before I dive into it, I do want to remind you guys to hit that subscribe button and make sure that you are helping us out growing this channel. I want the Sixers Digest channel, the family, to continue growing. We got some big plans for the season, so make sure you guys are a part of it from start to finish. But I do want to get into the news of the day, which of course is Montrezl Harrell being waived. So the Sixers roster is finally set, and we have a tweet from Shams Charania of The Athletic here saying, the Philadelphia 76ers are waiving center Montrezl Harrell, sources tell The Athletic and Stadium. Harrell's ACL/meniscus injury and absence make him the release due to a roster crunch, but he's aiming to make a return after the All-Star break. 76ers will continue supporting Harrell in his rehab and recovery plan, sources said. So to me, this is best case scenario. What this really means is that both Filip Petrusev and Danny Green will make the roster. Those were kind of the question marks. Both those guys were on non-guaranteed contracts entering training camp. Montrezl Harrell was on a guaranteed deal, which means the Sixers did have to swallow a little bit of money, and per Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype, says the Sixers are waiving Montrezl Harrell. Harrell appeared in 57 games and averaged 5.6 points last season with the Sixers. He suffered a torn ACL and meniscus and is owed $2.89 million this season. So good for Montrezl that you do still get your bag. You still are getting paid. You will be supported in your rehab process. And it simply is the correct decision to make sure that you are entering the season with 15 fully functioning bodies. With no disrespect to Montrezl Harrell, I think that there was an argument to be made that he could have been the guy even if this was the case. Now, let's not forget that Harrell was a guy that was brought in last year. He was a little bit of a mix of both a Doc Rivers and Daryl Morey guy. I feel like last year we saw a lot of clashing heads as far as roster decisions and what the rosters were designed to for each guy. Obviously, some differences of opinion as far as what is value when it comes to Daryl Morey and Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers, much more of the old school basketball mind, while Daryl Morey much more lives by the analytics. I do think there's a more clear-minded approach and eye-to-eye vision between Nick Nurse and Daryl Morey than was the case with Doc Rivers, and I do think Montrezl Harrell was a guy who got himself caught in the crossfire. Now, let's not forget that Montrezl Harrell was handed this one-year deal at the beginning of this offseason. This comes after a season in which he had a player option at the end. So there was a little bit of mixed signals in the Sixers world that Montrezl ultimately declined that player option and then signed on a minimum deal to the Sixers. Why that worked out is this was a little less money off the cap for the Sixers and a little more money in Montrezl Harrell's pocket for it. Veteran minimums contracts tend to count for a little less and are locked in at a certain number, so it did help out both sides, but ultimately we will not be seeing Montrezl Harrell in a Sixers uniform this year or likely ever again. And I will say, I am a fan of Montrezl Harrell, that I do very much respect his game. He is a guy that I've grown very fond of, have liked ever since his time at Louisville. I liked him coming out. He has turned into the oldest 30-year-old I've ever seen, and it was very disappointing and frustrating to see him on the court last year. There's very little pop left in his game, and it is frustrating because, like I said, I was a fan of his game. I do like it, and he is a guy that brings it. He is a very good locker room guy. I would have zero issue whatsoever if he remains around the organization or has an impact on the guys being there on a day-to-day. He is a guy that took it upon himself. We have the ladder moment with Giannis. We have that video of him getting in Embiid's face right before the playoffs of trying to hype him up. I liked having Montrezl around. It is disappointing that I feel his body is kind of letting him down at this point. That when I think about Montrezl Harrell as a basketball player, the best asset of him is him catching lobs, him slamming home dunks, him being ultra athletic, jumping around, and he just does not quite have that juice anymore. So it is unfortunate. I wish him the best in his recovery from this ACL, and I hope that this does inject some life back into his career, that I hope there is a second wind to Montrezl Harrell, and that's very much on the table. I do believe in him to put the work in to be a guy, and he does have some absolute offensive skills. There are just some limitations in his game that have continually progressed throughout his career. So shout out to Montrezl Harrell. Shout out for the 1 year you spent here, and ultimately that does mean that Filip Petrusev will be the third center on the team, which many are surprised about. As far as Petrusev specifically, and I want to begin by looking at this specific roster here. Here we go. The 15-man roster is now set for the Sixers. So to dive through this, we have Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, Tobias Harris, DeAnthony Melton, PJ Tucker, Kelly Oubre Jr., Paul Reed, Patrick Beverley, Daniel House Jr., Danny Green, James Harden, Jaden Springer, Mo Bamba, Filip Petrusev, and Furkan Korkmaz. So obviously the guy that stands out there is Furkan Korkmaz. No, I'm just kidding. But it is amazing that Furkan has now survived. I believe we are 3 trade requests in for Furkan Korkmaz, but he remains set in stone. But James Harden is obviously the biggest question mark, a little asterisk next to that name. I'm about to dive into him on a second. I do want to touch on first Filip Petrusev, that I've been pretty negative on the outlook of him. He's a guy that I just really haven't seen it from an NBA standpoint, specifically in the past 2 summers when he has played in Summer League. And it's very much been his goal to join the NBA, and these Sixers have kind of been like, let's pump the brakes on that one. Maybe get a little more seasoning in the Adriatic League and see how you look next summer. I will say this is the most complete I've seen him look as a basketball player. It seems like the guys genuinely like him, and you can make a real argument that he's outplayed Mo Bamba so far in the preseason, which I think is a more interesting storyline than many have paid attention to. That will be something to keep in mind as the regular season begins, and if either of them even see an opportunity on the floor, which there is no guarantee for that. But we know that there is some Joel Embiid injury concerns, so these guys have to stay ready and be at that moment. So we will see what happens with that, but I do want to discuss the James Harden situation, who is the biggest asterisk. We know that he has been holding out from Sixers training camp at this point. He is not participating in practice, and we have a report from Scoop B here, which says the James Harden update. Harden's return is uncertain because he's tending to his mom, who is ill, I'm told. The mindset of the 76ers point guard is that the health of his mother comes first. Quote, he's going through it, a source with knowledge shares. Quote, he loves to compete and he is in the best shape of his life, but he feels a sense of betrayal from Philly. That betrayal apparently stems from the Harden publicly calling the Sixers team president Daryl Morey a liar. Per a source, quote, hopefully he returns, but family comes first. Now, I don't want to be the guy that comes off completely heartless here. If James Harden's mom is ill, and I'm not calling into question that he's lying here, that's obviously, I understand it, is priority number one. What I will say, I want to hear it directly from the James Harden mouth, that I think he should publicly say, this is the reason that I'm flying back in Houston, this is why I'm here, and the reason that I have an issue with the handling of the situation overall. Let's take aside all the calling Daryl Morey a liar and all the unprofessional antics which he has already brought into the organization, is this occurred after he was already in Philly. That the first day that he missed practice, there was no direct line of communication for why he missed. That there was all the quotes, Joel Embiid getting flamed, saying maybe he had something to do, I don't know what he's up to, all these things. If you had started from day one when you began missing and said, my mom is sick, I need to take care of her, I have to leave training camp, it's a completely different story than what we're currently looking at. It feels to me a little bit similar to the Ben Simmons situation last year, who already started holding out, and then once he was a little bit in, came up with the reasoning of, you know what, I'm having some mental health issues. And once again, these are serious things. And to me, it waters down the legitimacy of things when you are just kind of throwing them at a wall. That if these are the issues you're dealing with, be upfront with that, let people know, and go deal with them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's plenty of rumors swirling around online about what specifically James Harden's mom is dealing with. I don't want to feed into any of that. I think it's a little messed up to speculate these types of, I guess, situations that guys have in these life, because we do forget that these are human beings. As much as we watch them do these superstar things, fly through the air, hit these step-back threes, at the end of the day, they have real-life responsibilities as well. And dealing with your mother who is ill is absolutely one that should climb to the top. But I do still have a little bit of doubt on just the fact of, is this why you were missing, or is this just kind of an excuse for why you don't want to be at camp? Is your mom being there the driving force for why you're away from these Sixers, or is it, the excuse that now that you're there, you came up with? I don't know. I would hope there's more of a communication between James Harden and the Sixers than there certainly is between me and James Harden. I would hope that they have a more concrete idea of the situation. I do believe James Harden owes it to them to say that, because while I'm calling these guys human beings, and this is a real-world issue, in our everyday lives that we have these real-world issues, we still have to suit up, go to work, and do those things. Now, again, we don't know any of the details. I refuse to speculate, and I don't want to feed into any of the rumors. Some of them are quite dark, and I don't want to to feed into that, and obviously sending thoughts and prayers no matter what is going on with Mrs. Harden. But it is interesting timing for all of these things, and I do hope that there is more clarity from the Sixers side of things. I also want to point to a quote from Keith Pompey, and here we have that he written a story. This is a quote from Daryl Morey here. Say, quote, I understand the sense of wanting more. Boston and Milwaukee made trades that there's a positive sentiment. I would say let's see it play out, because last year we had a good offseason. I think we did a lot of good moves this year, but from the perception-wise, last year was perceived as a very good offseason. Unfortunately, that still ended in disappointment. But it didn't change, right? This is strange to me. I don't understand why Daryl Morey is kind of opening his mouth in this situation. For the most part, I will give Morey the respect that he has stayed quiet over things, and I will say that this relationship between him and James Harden deteriorating is much harder on him than people are giving credit. That these are two guys that are professionally and personally tied forever. That over a decade they have spent together at the NBA level, achieved things together. James Harden has been the centerpiece of Daryl Morey's vision and a guy that has delivered on it. And it sucks to see it just kind of sour the way that it has. So we will see how this ultimately plays out. For the conspiracy theorists out there, I will point out that Terrence Mann has been ruled out of the Clippers season opener with an ankle injury. We've seen this before in other sports of mysterious injuries popping up right before guys are traded. I don't know if that's the case. Frankly, if I had to put my money down anywhere, I would say that we are only at the beginning of this James Harden saga, that I think this drags on well into the season. But there are some interesting, I guess, asterisks in other situations next to this as well. So to conclude this, I would like to say just prayers up to whatever is going on with James Harden's family specifically. I hope to see him back on the court. I think it is the only best outlook for everyone is for James Harden to showcase that he is still an NBA, high-level NBA player, a guy that is actually in the best shape of his life, that he is not just talking the talk with that. And I would also point out that James Harden has handled himself like a professional while he has been in the building. But the Sixers have also every right to fine him at this point in time. And it is my understanding of that situation specifically that is a league issue. That is not a Sixers decision whether he gets fined or not. That this will come down to the NBA stance, who very much, for the record, will be on the Sixers side of making sure James Harden fulfills his contract. Ultimately, there's still a lot of twists and turns that we are in for. Once again, sending prayers to Mrs. Harden for whatever the situation is there. But I just hope this situation is over. Shout out to Montrezl Harrell. Hope things go well from here. Everything else, we will see what happens. I'll be here breaking things down every step of the way. Once again, make sure to hit that subscribe button, ring the bell so you're not missing out on any content right here on Sixers Digest. And I will be talking with you next time. Peace.